Welcome everyone, this is On Just Restart. I am joined by my friend Dumo. How you doing, buddy?
Doing good, thanks.
Good. Glad to hear that, man. Today, what we're going to be talking about is Bayonetta 3 and this controversy around Hellena Tayler not taking the job and her feeling that she was not paid appropriately and her calling for a boycott of Bayonetta 3. So the topic of this discussion is questioning whether we should boycott Bayonetta 3. Is that fair? Should it happen? And we're going to be talking about this situation, and it's a bit of a sensitive subject, right? So I do want to kind of put that disclaimer here that we are talking about our opinions, right? When we say what we think, that doesn't mean we're saying that you should feel differently, you should do things differently. You got to make the decision for yourself on what's right to do. Because it's a sticky issue. On both sides, there are things going on, and we're going to be talking about and giving our thoughts. So with that all said, I would like to first let you guys know that Dumo's channel is linked in the description below, so please check him out. But also, throughout this discussion, we're going to be referencing these 3 different videos that came out on social media. We saw them on Twitter, and I'll have them linked in the description below. They are the actual clips that were posted by Hellena Tayler, where she said what she said about Platinum Games and what's going on, how unfairly she was treated, and why she thinks that we should boycott the game. So definitely check those out first if you haven't done so already, but we will be alluding to them throughout this discussion. I didn't want to watch them again for this discussion because I felt like it would take away from the actual discussion. But with all of that said, there's kind of like a lot to dissect here. Dumo, just surface level thoughts. What was your immediate reaction to seeing Hellena Tayler's 3 different videos calling for the boycott?
Immediate reaction was that I don't know enough about that part of the industry at all. There's a lot of questions, like, okay, she was lowballed and it was insulting, but how much of a lowball, how insulting, what's everything that goes into it? And then also, I mean, looking at the industry, kind of not surprised, unfortunately. Yourself?
Yeah. First off, let me also explain. Dumo's using a different camera today, so that's why I have like the bigger camera. Just for those wondering, right? I'm not trying to hide Dumo. This works out better for this time around. But my immediate thoughts on the videos. It's just one of those things where, like, I don't want bad things to happen, right? Like, I want everything to just go smoothly. You know, I want the game to come out. I want there to be no issues. I want the game to be reviewed well. I want people to be excited about it. I want people to get into it. I want it to perform well. I'm a Nintendo fan, right? And this is a big game for the Switch, and I haven't played and beaten all the Bayonetta games. I am actually working through Bayonetta 1 right now. But I was feeling Bayonetta 3. Like, I was actually kind of vibing with what they had shown. I was excited for this game. So, you know, to see all this news, it sucks. Because this obviously, you know, disdains the image of Platinum Games and Kamiya and Bayonetta, and then it doesn't look good for Nintendo either, right? So, as a hardcore Nintendo fan, you know, it's not exciting to see this. But on the flip side, I've done acting in the past, right? I didn't pursue, I at one point pursued a career in acting. I've transitioned, but, you know, I've done theater, I've done short films, and, you know, I kind of can relate to someone who is looking to be paid. I mean, heck, even with what I do here on YouTube, you know, which there are theatrics involved, it's a performance to an extent. We're not paid very much to do YouTube either, right? I would love to be paid appropriately, a dignified living, healthy wage for what I do. It doesn't always work out that way because it's just the business world. But, you know, I think it would be wonderful if everyone could be paid what they deserve to be paid, and they can do what they love and afford to do it and live comfortably. Like, ideally, that would be wonderful. But that's not how things always work out. But when you have a big industry, when it comes to video games and movies and acting, and there are unions involved and things of that nature, a lot of these things, like unions, are put into place to kind of, you know, protect actors, but not everyone's a part of those unions. But anyways, specifically with what she said, it sucks because, you know, I would want her to be paid well. But I see what was said, and I wonder, okay, I also don't feel like I know enough about the situation. Like, first she says, oh, Bayonetta makes has made $450 million, right? And $450 million may seem like a lot of money, but how much is it actually, right? It may have grossed that much money, but how much is actual profits? And that's distributed throughout the entire series, right? Like, that's how much money that was made on Bayonetta 1. And back on Bayonetta 1, it came out, on PC? It came out on Xbox, came out on PlayStation, and eventually it came out on Wii U and then Switch, right? So it's not like all those sales have come directly from Nintendo. That's been spread out over years. And then there's Bayonetta 2, which I believe, isn't Bayonetta 2 on PC currently? No, I'm gonna say no. I'm gonna say it's not. I think there was some debate about that, but I don't think there's a PC version because that's a Nintendo exclusive. I don't think so. No, I don't think so. Yeah,
Wii U and Switch only.
Yeah,
so far.
Maybe illegally, it's available on PC, but yeah.
Yeah, that tends to be the way.
But anyways, point is that initially the franchise wasn't a Nintendo exclusive, right? And actually, I think this is important to consider when we talk about this overall situation. Platinum Games is not considered like a big lucrative developer. Like there have been stories of them struggling to get deals done and having their games published. Like, obviously they're successful because we hear about Platinum Games every year. They do get things done, but there has been a history of struggling. Specifically with Bayonetta, Bayonetta 1 was not going. Bayonetta 1 was going to be it. Bayonetta 2 only happened because Nintendo came in and funded the project. And since then, Bayonetta has been exclusive to Nintendo. It wasn't gonna happen. They did not have the funding to do it. No one else was gonna publish it. So when you take that into consideration, this history of not always having the proper funding, and then you look at in this situation here where Platinum Games was not willing to pay Hellena Tayler enough money to do her role that she felt was fair. You know, on one hand, it's not fair for her, but then on the other, you know, what kind of budget does Platinum Games even have for this? Like, that's also something we don't know. So there's kind of like issues on both sides here. But anyways, point is, like, I don't know enough about what their funding is, what their budget is, how much they would actually be making. And also, I don't know how much a voice actor should necessarily be paid. I'm sure there's quite a range there. And how much work is she going to be doing? You know, she's only going to be putting in an hour of work. $4,000 seems like a lot for an hour of work, but it's probably more than an hour of work. And she's also been the voice since the beginning. So what is a fair wage for her? That wasn't discussed to us. She just said she expected a fair wage, but what is a fair wage? So there's a lot of questions about that, and there's also a lot of questions about her emotions and her allusions towards Jennifer Hale as well, and what she suggested about her that seemed out of character for her to kind of go against and criticize another voice actor. So there's a lot of different weird angles to this. But I mean, yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to decide where we go from here, because there's just so many different issues that you can take from this 3 little videos.
I did, before I actually jumped on with you, I was talking with some other friends, and one of them happens to have a little bit more knowledge, not of this situation in general, but of situations regarding the entertainment industry and some of the things that happen behind the scenes in legality. What, again, like, we don't actually have the full information, but something that often happens is that in a contract, an actor it might be contractually that they have to give them a first offer, and they may have chosen to do so in a way that was less than ideal, or in this case insulting, because they thought they had a different voice actor lined up that they believed would be better for them. So there is a chance with the displeasure towards Silly cat. With the displeasure towards Jennifer Hale is that she believes that she was lowballed intentionally for them to drop her to get Jennifer Hale. And if that's the case, that's pretty bad. But I can kind of understand it because Jennifer Hale is a big name.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely part of the controversy here, right? It's not just that she didn't like the offer and she chose not to do the job, which is the case. She chose not to do the job. She was given the option to do it, just not for the wages she felt were fair. It seems like there is a little bit of a jealousy going on here towards Jennifer Hale, who we checked her IMDb. It's more prolific and longer and more consistent than Hellena Tayler's, at least when it comes to like film roles and voice and video game roles. I could see how that may be an element, and if it is the case, we don't know, but if it is the case that they intentionally lowballed her because they knew who they really wanted, that does seem kind of bad. But I can't fault a company for picking an actor they think is a better fit. But to do that, that tactic though of intentionally lowballing just so you can say you gave her an offer and then move on to someone else you would prefer, that I think is not good. I think it should have been, hey, look, we're gonna go with someone else. Like that, if that's what they truly felt, they should have just said, hey, look, we're going in a different direction, as opposed to just giving her an offer, because that's deceptive, right? Like I don't think that's fair. If that's what happened, we don't know.
But at the same time, they're also looking. Jennifer Hale is a bigger name than Hellena Tayler. They may have assumed that again, when you put bigger names on your advertisements, you draw in more fans, and they may have thought that by doing this, they would be able to get more eyes on Bayonetta 3, which, from a business standpoint, I understand it. I don't like it. I don't like it at all, but I understand it. But then you also have the other part of Hellena Tayler crafted the way this character speaks, how they sound, how like Bayonetta is from an acting standpoint completely Hellena Tayler's creation. Lines, I don't know how much freedom she had with lines and how they were changed and how much, because voice actors will do that in studio where they will make changes to lines. They'll give something out there and see how it works. And that's just a big part of acting. And if she's going in and giving more than just reading off a set lines and just pounding it out as fast as possible, there's quite a bit more attachment to that character and to that job than just I'll read these and get out of here. So
I'll say this: I
tough.
listened to an actual interview of Hellena Tayler and her thoughts on Bayonetta 1 and 2, and that also be linked in the description below. I would like to actually point out on Twitter, Frank Stallion at Travis Demon. We had a little bit of a Twitter discussion on the issue, and they brought up that for Bayonetta 1, she did 4 4-hour sessions to do all the voice acting for Bayonetta 1, so total 16 hours. And there's this podcast, which will be linked in the description below, where or an interview where she talked about all of that. And she also talked about how she didn't even know that much about the character going in because they didn't want to tell her too much details because of NDA and things of that nature. And she basically kind of just came up with a character on the spot within a few minutes. And so she did her 16 hours of work, and then, that they loved it. I mean, she first had to do an audition, she passed, and then they loved it. And then the character kind of, at least her understanding of the character, evolved more after the fact. But it's interesting to kind of put that into perspective in terms of how that character came together. So I definitely recommend checking out that interview as well. But kind of coming back to the numbers there, right? She said she was offered 4,000. She's been doing work for years, right? She works in theater and film and voice acting. I don't know how much $4,000 would be, and I don't know exactly how much work she was going to do for Bayonetta 3 compared to Bayonetta 1 or 2. What I can say is this. If she was paid the same amount, that would have been $250 per hour. 4,000 divided by 16 is 250. Now, $250 an hour sounds really good to me, right? But there's things to take into consideration for that, right? It's not a consistent $250 per hour where she has a job that she wakes up in the morning, works 8 hours, and does that 5 days a week, where it's $250 consistently. If it was like that, that's really good money. That puts you well above many people. Many people. It beats probably 97% of the people listening to this show, right? Like a lot of people. But it's not a consistent $250 per hour. It's for it's for however long it takes to do this game, say 4 or 5 sessions, and that's it, and you're done. You got to move on to another project, or you're not going to be getting consistent income. And considering her history, considering how Bayonetta is where Bayonetta is now and how known it is, I can see how she would think maybe that she could be paid more. I did try and do a little bit of soft research in terms of how much voice actors are paid for video games, and according to Bunny Studio, it can range between $200 and $350 per hour, with a minimum of 2 to 4 hour sessions. So, I guess that $4,000 number falls within that range, but not even on the high point of the range, more on the low part of that range. But again, we're also assuming that she would have to work 16 hours to get $4,000 for Bayonetta 3, but we don't know that. That's just how much it was for Bayonetta 1. So I tried to see if I can get a good estimate on that, and I took a look at the length of Bayonetta 1. Bayonetta 1 apparently is about 11 and a half hours. Bayonetta 2 is apparently about 9 hours. So they're comparable in terms of length, and there's some flexibility there. But I also made sure to take a look at the total amount of cutscenes length compared to each other. And Bayonetta 1 had 2.5 hours worth of cutscenes, and so did Bayonetta 2. So they had a similar amount of cutscenes, and the lengths were both close to 10 hours, give or take 1 hour, right? Around there. So if that's the case, you would assume Bayonetta 3 may also be around that range, right? It seems like the gameplay length and the cutscenes, there's a good chance they're probably going to be comparable to 1 and 2. And if that's the case, I wouldn't be surprised if the amount of voiceover work that's required, 4-hour sessions, 16 hours, might also be around what she was expected to do for Bayonetta 3. We don't know that. It could be less, it could be more, but simply based on what we've seen for Bayonetta 1 and 2, it's more likely than not close to that. So with that all said, if she's getting offered $4,000 and she's going to work about 16 hours to do it, that's only $250 per hour. And according to the range I've seen, it does fall within the range, but it's not the high part of the range. And she's been doing Bayonetta for a while. So I can see how she might think, hey, I deserve more than that. Especially if she's not getting consistent work. She may feel that this is a big role that should last her for a little while. She shouldn't have to do something like Bayonetta 3 every month just to get by, right? We don't know how much longer it'll take for her to get work. But also that's not necessarily on Platinum Studios to make sure she's paid throughout the year. It's for the job. But I can see how she might think it's a little bit of a lowball. Not even knowing the full-on numbers of how it typically would be.
The other thing we have to consider is that a lot of times work like this is done in studio, so she has to get there. There's a lot of things that we don't know how much work, how much effort, how much work she's done on voices and changing voices, because Bayonetta does have different voices going on with the different characters and like of Bayonetta right now that we're seeing in 3, and we don't know how much work she did beforehand preparing for this role, expecting to have this role.
Yeah.
And then she's done say she's put in, say she's been doing a month of working on this, and then she gets a lowball offer. She writes to the director, gets a response to the director saying, I love your work and I think the fans want you back and I want you back. Here's another lowball offer.
Right.
That's like, we don't know how much extra work is done outside of that 16 hours in studio.
Sure.
So
it's not just the hours, right? It's the expertise as well, right? You're not just being paid for like the time you're working, but you know, like how much there's preparation that goes into that, right? And actually, if you listen to the thing I linked, she talks about how voice acting is something you work on. Your voice is a muscle that takes practice and training. And even in the video she posted, she made reference to her work history or her training, where she spent years in school. And yeah, so there is work that goes into that. So after training your voice for years, you expect to be paid well for it because of the amount of time you put into that. So, I mean, that's something that should be considered too. But I'm glad you brought up Hideki Kamiya, because that's a whole other wrinkle to this conversation. So, for those who don't know, Hideki Kamiya is the producer for Bayonetta and other big platinum games. And on Twitter, he's very weird. He's an eccentric character in general, but on Twitter, he's especially weird because he blocks everyone for any little reason. If you try and speak to him in English, he will block you, right? If you say something negative about him, he'll probably block you. Sometimes people feel like they get blocked for random reasons that are unpredictable. It's what he does. He just blocks people all the time, whether it's good-natured or not. It happens all the time. I'm not quite sure why. I wonder if it's just his way to kind of control how much people are sort of reaching out to him so he can still have access to his Twitter account. It's definitely peculiar. It's not like how other famous people handle their social media pages, but it is something to be noted. However, with this event that has transpired, he had some things to say. Went on a huge blocking spree, as he would, as we all expected him to do. That was not out of character. But then it looks like Twitter wiped him. Like he's just been deleted from the Twitterverse, which is very interesting. I wonder if it's just because they felt his behavior was just really so unorthodox that they blocked him. Which
he might have done it himself too, just to
maybe.
If it's just the whole mass blocking might even be a way to control his Twitter so that he can go on Twitter and not be bombarded by negativity, which it happens.
Yeah.
That's Twitter.
Yeah. Now, before he was blocked, though, or I don't know what, before he disappeared from Twitter, I don't know what happened. He said this. He tweeted, "Sad and deplorable about the attitude of untruth. That's what all I can tell now. By the way, beware of my rules." So he's Japanese, right? So it's not the English is broken there. But obviously he's suggesting that the whole story isn't being told truthfully. Like there's more to it than that, and that's all I can say for now, which could be an allusion to there's legalities involved with this, right? So he may not even be allowed to say what's going down right now publicly. Yeah.
NDAs probably are playing a role in this.
Yeah.
too.
So that's a whole other thing. We don't know the full story, and because of legal reasons and maybe potentially also spoiling elements of the game, that can't be spoken on. And then also he says, beware of my rules. So he's warning people that he will block them if they don't follow his rules. So, you know, even though he blocks everyone, he is at least warning them that he will block them. Right? So yeah. I'll take that, but now we can't, his Twitter no longer exists. I don't know if it's a temporary thing or a forever thing, but that's what's going on right now. I have to imagine that as the creator of Bayonetta, to see this kind of controversy right before the game is going to come out is got to be pretty upsetting. Because it makes the game look bad, it makes platinum games look bad, it makes him look bad, and obviously there's a fear that the game won't perform well because she's calling for a boycott. She's telling people not to buy this game because they didn't hire her, and she feels that it was unfair. And, you know, I'll say this. From what we know, it does sound like she was not given a really great number. And that's unfortunate. And now we have this more high-profile voice actor doing the role. We don't know how much she was paid. It will be interesting to see what that is. Because if it's also $4,000... That you know, there's different angles to this, right? Because if they paid her more money, it looks bad. If they pay her the same amount of money, it still arguably looks bad, because then you question, well, why didn't they have more funding?
Now, the other issue that's kind of hide this a little bit. There's a big difference between paying someone $4,000 for the job, for the piece, and then paying another person $4,000 for the piece plus royalties. And they might try to, like, that might be what's happened, and they might even try to say, well, both of them were getting paid $4,000 for the work, and they might even try to not mention royalties on top of that. So even as information comes out, I don't think we're going to get full information that is completely truthful, that we can fully rely on, because both sides are going to be trying to put themselves in the best light.
And you know, I don't want to come off as attacking Hellena Tayler here, but there are some things she does that I'm not in agreement with. You know, as much as I think she deserves to be paid well, and I love the work she's done, I think it's a little odd that this information comes out now the way it does, right before the game's released, because it feels like the goal is to ruin the game, which I'm not okay with. And let me explain before some people jump to conclusions here. I've seen a lot of discussion talking about how it's unfair to Hellena Tayler, and it may very well be unfair. But what about everyone else that worked on this game for 5 years? There's hundreds of people that have been involved with this project. Is it fair for them that what they've poured years of their life into not get its fair opportunity out in the world? Not just for money reasons, right? But just as a form of art and labor. Like, the end goal is for it to be appreciated by others. So if there's this movement to not purchase the game, then the game can't be, if let's say that boycott is successful and a lot of people play the game, then, you know, this work that people have been working on for years is never appreciated because one person said that they were treated unfairly. And maybe they are, but I'm just saying there's other people involved here. Like, if Bayonetta 3 is boycotted and everyone puts their money into charity, okay, great. So Hellena Tayler got what she asked for. That doesn't help her, by the way, right? She still isn't paid for her work. She didn't get her fair shake. But also, the hundreds of people that worked on Bayonetta 3, they worked on it for nothing. Yeah, at least in terms of the game being appreciated. Like, people don't go into game development for the money. Right, so you can say, oh, well, they got paid. Isn't that fine enough? No, because one, if Bayonetta 3 doesn't sell well, are they going to do a Bayonetta 4? Will they have an opportunity to do another one? That impacts maybe their future work. But then also, again, they don't do this necessarily for the money. They do it for the love of video games and video game development and making something for someone else to enjoy. So if people don't enjoy it, I don't think that's fair either. So I feel like that's another angle to consider here. And it's a sticky situation because the other angle is that, you know, it's a known thing that voice actors are not paid appropriately. It's an issue in varying industries, including the video game industry. So, you know, how does that handled? Because that's another point to consider. Like, we do need to have that discussion. We do need to talk about, you know, how unfairly voice actors are paid. But then
that's the other thing, too. Like, you don't want to see the game do poorly and have all the people that were involved in it sort of not really have their work appreciated. But at the same time, if nothing happens, if nothing is brought forward, if there is no movement, then the way voice actors are treated never improves. So something has to give, something has to happen. It's happening with Bayonetta rather than, just any other game right now. So in order for this to improve, something has to happen, something has to work. It just, hopefully it doesn't tank an entire IP in order to make this happen.
Yeah.
But
something else to point out.
If you want change, you have to do something to make change.
Yeah. And just kind of speak more on this issue though, right? Like, I'm taking a look at IMDb, and I'm looking at Helena Tayler's IMDb. On IMDb, the last things we see are from 2014. Super Smash Bros. And Bayonetta 2 in 2014. So there's nothing else on IMDb there. So I don't know what she's been doing since then. I'm assuming she's been doing theater. But she hasn't. It's not reporting her voice acting work. What were you saying?
I just want to point out that Smash Bros. Again is voicing Bayonetta. So there probably wasn't a ton of voice acting work that went into that role. So it probably wasn't as lucrative as voicing Bayonetta 2 would have been at that point in time.
Sure. But then the whole other angle here is in how lucrative could have Bayonetta 2 been? Because if they're just giving her like a flat rate and that's all it is, like, that's not a lot of money, right? Like, so let's say, if she got paid $4,000 to do Bayonetta 2, let's say she get paid $4,000 for every video game she voice acts in. She only got paid $4,000 3 times in 2014. Again, I don't know what the numbers are. I'm just kind of like thinking about that. Like, that's not enough to get by, right? She has to be doing a whole bunch of other voice acting work, getting paid that kind of money throughout the year. And I don't see that on IMDb. I have to assume she does other things. She does theater and things of that nature. But if there's no royalties involved, like, she's not making a lot of money here. And I wonder why there's not royalties. I looked it up recently. Apparently, royalties is not really a common thing for voice acting in video games. And I wonder why.
However, in acting, like like when we're looking at actual movies, that is a common thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, again, things have to change. This is
and it could be one of those situations where video games are becoming a bigger and bigger medium, and this could be one of those situations where, hey, it's about time that video games catch up and voice actors be paid more appropriately. Maybe they can't give them a bigger sum of money in the beginning, but maybe they should be entitled to some level of royalties. Now, something you gotta think about, video games oftentimes are gonna have different languages. So there's gonna be different voice actors across each language. And each, if every single character is played by a different person in several different languages and each person's getting royalties, you're distributing out a lot of royalties, so you probably have to be very cautious about that number, I imagine. But something like, what if there's at least some level of passive income that comes from that? I feel like you can come to a percentage. It doesn't have to be like a big percentage, but something, because as you continue to do work, you're building up that passive income over time, and that would facilitate voice actors that have been doing the in the industry for a while, slowly doing one role after another. They're building up those royalties, it makes sense to me, right? Obviously it's not happening for a reason though, because at the end of the day, royalties is still money. It's still less profit for the company. But if you're gonna have controversy like this, at some point, you would think that there would be change. So, from that perspective, you could argue maybe it's a necessary evil that Bayonetta 3 gets boycotted, because if that's what it takes for the industry to learn and to start paying people better, maybe it starts happening, which I don't want to see. But actually, on that note of Bayonetta suffering, because of this.
But just to point out, you don't want to see Bayonetta take the hit.
I do
To
not.
make it happen.
I do not.
Not that you don't want to see change.
Yeah, I want to see change, but I also want Bayonetta 3 to not take the hit. Like, I want my cake and I want to eat it too. So, you know, there's that's what I want that to be clear. But what's interesting is that when we take a look at, for example, Pokemon Sword and Shield and the whole National Dex issue with that, there is very violent conversation, hostile conversation about that issue for a long while. If you talk about it now, people are still going to talk about it and be angry about it. They called for change. There was a demand for a boycott. I feel like it was a vocal minority, but it was a very vocal minority. And what happened? Pokemon Sword and Shield became the second best-selling Pokemon game of all time. So I don't know what that boycott led to. Maybe it would have been the best-selling Pokemon game of all time. We don't know. But the game still did incredibly well. So I don't know. But the main point is, if there was truly a boycott and people really stood by it, doesn't seem like it made an impact financially speaking. You know, like it didn't show in the numbers, it seems like. And interestingly, I haven't seen proof of this myself, but I'm seeing people talking about it now. It seems like it's hard. It's a lot of sales are happening on Amazon on Bayonetta 3 now after the controversy came out. So this also might end up having an adverse effect, and calling for the boycott may end up boosting Bayonetta 3 sales as opposed to hurting it. Which, from one angle, is great for Bayonetta 3 because, okay, Bayonetta 3 is more likely to succeed. It's a niche series that I think deserves to be more popular. That's another angle that I think is worth talking about here, right? Because this isn't Call of Duty. This isn't Pokemon. These aren't like major franchises that see millions of dollars of sales no matter what happens every year, and they're recycling content. No, Bayonetta is a series that almost was canceled, done for forever, but Nintendo came in to save the series so they can continue. It's a relatively small audience compared to other big series out there, and there aren't too many entries. There's Bayonetta 1, there's Bayonetta 2, and we've been waiting since 2017, since it was announced, for Bayonetta 3, and now it's finally coming out more than 5 years later. That's a long time to wait for a game. And it's finally happening. So to see a series like that finally get some good sales would be lovely, because it's a niche series that at one point wasn't going to exist. So, you know, again, I don't want Bayonetta 3 to fail, but it's one of those things where she's calling for a boycott, and I understand that if the boycott could be good, because the idea behind it is that, hey, if people don't pay their voice actors appropriately, then there's going to be a boycott and your game's not going to sell well. So then developers will be like, oh, well, we got to make sure they get paid. But if it has an adverse effect, then this whole call for a boycott is not going to be an effective strategy.
I will counter that with saying that even if the boycott doesn't actually happen or work, the fact that we are talking about it, the fact that it is being brought to the forefront, means something. Maybe it doesn't do anything this game, but now hopefully people are paying more attention to the voice actors in the games. People, like, again, it didn't do a lot when it came out that game developers were like, studios were treating their developers poorly. It didn't change much in sales, but then people kept paying more and more attention to it, and it became an issue as you go on, as people realize, okay, this isn't a one-off, something really needs to change. This might be the start of a change, and that alone, and again, like, it kind of sucks for Hellena Tayler, but she might take a big hit for this to, in the end, 5-10 years from now, actually make a big, meaningful change in the industry. And unfortunately, she might not reap any benefits from it. She might get pushed out of the industry and not get any more work. I think
it's sad to say, but I think that might be the case, because I think she broke NDA. So that you know, if you're breaking an NDA, I don't see how you're going to be able to be involved with the industry, right? And continuing on that train, sorry, I
I
just
don't
want to make
understand
this
what
point real
NDA she
quick.
can. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, well, she made reference to it. She also alluded to a spinoff. So that might be what it is. Breaking NDAs is bad, but she also said she doesn't care because she has nothing to be taken away. She has nothing to lose, which is kind of speaking more to her poverty or the state of her situation. She talked about going through depression and having poor mental health, and how she hasn't been in a good financial situation. And then I talked about her IMDb earlier. She doesn't have anything on her IMDb since 2014. So I don't know what kind of work she's been doing since. Again, I assume something, but it hasn't been anything prominent. So because there's nothing on the IMDb. So that's also really sad, right? So if this ends up pushing her out of the industry altogether, that's sad. But also, it doesn't look like she's really been working in the industry as of late. So she might not care. She might be done with voice acting and she's just ready to move on to theater. I don't know. But it is very sad that it's come to this. Maybe, there's a way that they can, come to an agreement. Maybe there can be some sort of happy ending here, right? Maybe they could make an announcement, say, hey, we're going to make sure to up the game to honor, Hellena Tayler as the original voice actor in the credits, and we're going to give her some level of royalties moving forward or something. Like that would be that would be nice to see, because at that point they're like, hey, look, we are going to pay homage to where this came from, but we're also going to move forward at the same time. Like I think that might be kind of a nice little thing to do. That in conjunction with what you're talking about, the fact that this is a conversation point, the fact that people like us are making videos about this, and we're going to be having conversations and arguments in the chat about what's the right thing to do. There's an awareness that's being stirred, and hopefully this does lead to more proactive changes. Maybe the next time there's a conversation on who's the voice actor for something, a developer will feel, or a publisher will be like, oh, we should probably be more vocal about who's doing this and if they're being paid appropriately or what have you, because people are gonna have more questions on that going forward, right? Like, and the next time we see a game and there's some sort of conversation about the voice actor, we're gonna have this moment in mind. Like, oh, remember what happened with Hellena Tayler? Like, why is this new voice actor taking place in this whole other game? What happened with the previous one? And there's gonna be questions. There's gonna be pressure. And so maybe that kind of pressure will benefit the industry moving forward, to your point.
Yeah, it's something I'd like to see. The other thing is, we talk about her not having royalties, which, again, we don't really know, but it's common to have something like that happen. And if she's getting low budget, it kind of makes sense. But at the same time, it's like if she doesn't have royalties for at least the 2 games she did, for Bayonetta 1 and 2, well, when Nintendo re-releases them and does a little bit of work just to get them running on the system, which, again, like, there's things involved. If she's not getting paid for that, but they're now doing, like, spending a lot less money to reap a bunch of extra sales, that doesn't sit well. So I hope, if nothing else, they can make changes like that, because there needs to be something done, even if it's just retroactively. I hope Bayonetta 3 does well, and I hope they relook at the treatment, and I hope fans start paying attention to who's voicing the games and seeing what else they've done. And that's kind of where the problem is right now. Jennifer Hale has a name that can bring people in, whereas Hellena Tayler doesn't. And unless you know Bayonetta, you're probably not really following much of what she's doing. And that's kind of where she's losing out on this, is she's losing out to a bigger name. But if we had more ties to the name and the voice actors, and we asked about it, where it's like the voice actor's name is on the cover of a game, like how an actor's name is on the advertising or on a case of a DVD or blue whatever of a movie, that would be where they would get more power for bargaining, and they'd be able to ask for more and maybe get that fair, more livable wage.
It's tough. It's tough, and we just don't have a lot of information on what's going down and how she's been treated. I would like to see that information, right? So I'm going to imagine that this isn't the last update on this story. I feel like this is a story that there will be more chapters to as the coming days gone. This has all happened over the course of the weekend, right? Like I think yesterday morning that the news broke. That was a Saturday. Like we haven't even hit the week yet. What happens during the week where Platinum Games and their legal team is probably actually working? Like they're gonna have to figure out things, and there may be a statement from Platinum Games, an official one, that comes out, and that may suggest some things. So I'm definitely gonna keep my eyes peeled on this, but I also think that there do need to be steps made to make sure that voice actors in the industry are appropriately supported, because if you want them to do the work, well, they should be paid fairly, or else it's going to be a dying breed.
We keep complaining about things like Pokemon not having voice acting, and it really could use it. I
literally made a video about this yesterday, because we saw that teaser trailer of Iona, the new gym leader, and her talking, and it sounded great, but then they showed the gameplay, and she still looked like she had that great personality, but there was no voice coming out of her lips, and it just was kind of mute and awkward. So yeah, but then a company like that, Pokemon company, like you would think that they'd be able to afford voice acting, but these things are tricky. We'll save the Pokemon discussion for another day. Any final thoughts, Dumo? I guess I should ask you the question. Do you think we should boycott Bayonetta 3?
That's going to be something very personal for everyone. I can't say whether or not someone else should. From my standpoint, I was not actually looking to pick up Bayonetta 3 due to the fact that I've got a lot of stuff crammed in right now, and I don't have a lot of time for it. But where this kind of loses me is there is always a time rolling up to where at this point in time it's getting ready to come out. They should be putting their best foot forward, and I should be questioning that choice rather than right now. It's very easy for me to go, oh yeah, I'll just I'll stay the course and not get it. And that's sort of where they might I feel like that's where they'll lose more people than rather an actual boycott happening.
I see. Yeah, the people that were on the fence, they'll be like, oh, there's this, okay, whatever. Like it's something that may steer some people away, as opposed to losing out on like pre-order sales and things like that. Because you see some people talk about canceling their pre-orders on Twitter, but we don't know the numbers on that. On the flip side, as I mentioned earlier, there are signs suggesting that sales might boost from this. So it's interesting to see how that all will come together. But my opinion is, I don't think I should boycott Bayonetta 3. I'm also not 100% bought in on the game. I'm probably gonna get it, though. I don't know if I'll pick it up day one. This has nothing to do with the controversy. It's just kind of like personal time, money, things of that nature. But it is a game that I've had my eyes on. So if the opportunity arises, I probably will still pick it up. I don't think it's fair to punish everyone else who's been working on this game because one person was not offered a proper amount of money. It would be a little different if they were offered a certain amount of money, they did the job and weren't paid that. That would be illegal. But that has not happened. I do think that there needs to be more of a discussion and awareness made towards voice actors like Hellena Tayler. It's very unfortunate. It's sad. I hope there's something that can be done where her situation is improved. But I also think there's a lot of people that have put their heart and soul into Bayonetta 3, and they want that game to be really good, and they want people to enjoy it. And maybe I'll be one of those people enjoying the game in a few weeks. We'll see.
I don't think a boycott is actually, from what we've seen, especially, I don't think this is far-reaching enough to make an actual meaningful boycott that hinders the sales. My hope at this point in time is that the awareness is enough to actually start at least creating the discussion for change, because I think it needs to happen.
Yeah, I agree. That I think that's fair. So keep talking about it, guys. Make your opinions known. I think that's important because it does make a difference. But anyways, everyone, this is On Just Restart. That's Dumo. His channel is linked in the description below. The interviews and sources and everything we mentioned throughout the video will also be linked in the description below. But that's all for now. Take care.
Bye.